distinguished participants, you're all welcome. My name is Can Kantarcı. I am working as the Communication Director of Columbia Global Center, and we are very happy to meet you today. Columbia Global Center of Istanbul was established in 2011 to conduct program relevant to Turkey. Our center is collaborating with the civil society organizations and various institutions, and we are also active in culture, architecture, arts, together with the Columbia University. We have experienced an earthquake on the 6th of February, and it's very difficult to put it in words. We have lost more than 50,000 people, hundreds of thousands of people were wounded, and hundreds of thousands of people lost their relatives. Apart from the losses, there will be economic impacts which will be reverberating in the coming future. As the Columbia Global Center, we are collaborating with our shareholders within our university and our institutions. Today, we are going to host 4 different guests. Murat Germen is an artist, academic, and archivist using photography as an expression research tool. Receiving his MA degree from MIT, he currently works as a professor of art, photography, and new media at Sabancı University in Istanbul. He has joined over 80 international solo and national group exhibitions. Ayten Zara is a psychologist and human rights advocate who has worked extensively with victims of domestic and sexual violence. She's a full-time faculty member at Istanbul Bilgi University and the founder of the World Human Relief Association, which works to improve living conditions and prevent violence and trauma against children. Açelya Uçan is Çatı Women's Shelter Foundation's program coordinator, which is a non-profit organization engaging in one-to-one solidarity with women and making policy recommendations to eradicate violence and achieve gender equality. In addition to her experience with Çatı, Uçan has also worked with other NGOs focusing on gender equality, child rights, and refugee rights. Mert Uğur Aksoy works with various civil society organizations as a consultant, specializing in resource development, volunteer management, and motivation. He's currently a resource development specialist at the Lokman Hekim Health Foundation. He focuses on supporting STOs and NGOs that prioritize animal welfare, environment, women's issue, and education. Atatürkoğlu is going to be the host of this meeting, and if you have any questions, you can ask them by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now I would like to leave the floor to our first speaker, Murat Germen. Thanks very much for being with us. Thanks very much for having me in such a valuable event. Now, before we proceed with the photographs, I would like to share with you a textual information. During the earthquake in 1999, I had been working as a guide for 2 groups of specialists. And I had the experience of getting to know their approach towards the earthquakes. And this was also informative for me. And while I was taking photographs, this is how I learned about what to pay attention to exactly. After this great disaster, we tried to reach to the earthquake zone. We were thinking on ways to help. We tried to find some ways to help a lot, and I decided to do something myself. I went there for a technical documentation study, and this could be taken as a crime scene investigation act. It wasn't an artistic act at all. It was a documentary attempt. And the results of this study are shared using Google Drive to whomever could make use of it. This could be a researcher, architect, academic, engineer, map makers, whoever can take advantage of this work can have access. So all the photographs are open for use. There was a benefit to it, especially during the reconstruction phase. There are various study groups, especially in Antakya. I have been invited by various groups, people who wanted to see the outcome of this study, invited me for future collaborations. which made me really happy because I finally managed to feel that the work that I have been undertaking was being put to use. Now, as I said, these were technical photographs. For example, this is the consequence of using bad quality iron bars. I mean, I have taken thousands of photographs, but this is only a selection of the photographs. This is about the most important aspect of the carcass that makes the building stand. So columns and the beams, use of correct iron material and correct connection materials were very important, and you need to use the correct amount of iron, and this has something to do with the quality of the concrete as well. You have to pay attention to various factors when you're talking about the damage that the building suffered during the earthquake. You have to adopt a very meticulous attitude. You can see different columns from various cities. By the way, I was unable to visit all the cities because it was school time and I had to go back. Maraş, Urfa, Antep, and Hatay provinces were the provinces that I was in. There were also some comparative photographs as well. All the photographs that I have taken could be assigned a GPS thanks to a method that I have found. Unfortunately, we don't have GPS module in professional cameras, but I was able to assign some GPS coordinates to be able to make comparisons. On the top, you see the Google Street View photos, and down below, I have the pictures that I have taken. Thanks to this coordinates, I can easily identify the Google Street View images of the cities. So I managed to produce comparative photography, because when you see a debris, you most of the time think that it belongs to more than one building. As you can see, they belong to more than one building. I think this clearly shows the gravity of the situation. And after a while, this looks like a repetition because all the debris, all the rubble are very much like each other. So this prevents you from getting the grasp of the entire situation. I'm proceeding very quickly. There's a very interesting situation in Maraş, in the old buildings and in the buildings with low quality iron, low quality concrete, and low amount of concrete and iron, and plus the weak grounds, the fluid grounds at the center created this situation where more than 10, 15 buildings next to each other collapsed altogether. As you can see, there is severe damage, but I was happy to see the following. This is Maraş province, Doğukent neighborhood, and these are new buildings. And the ground is firm. And when the new buildings come together with the firm ground, yes, there is a certain level of damage, as you can see on the left, but the buildings didn't collapse to kill the people. So the buildings did what they supposed to do. This was a happy occasion because these buildings were built in line with the earthquake directives, because 90% of the buildings within this neighborhood managed to survive. Of course, they are damaged and they will not be used in the future, but at least they kept the residents alive. Of course, the most severe damage took place in Hatay and especially in Antioch. Antioch or Antakya is a multicultural province and one of the most important regions of Turkey, which had to be highly protected, meticulously protected, but unfortunately, there was such a destruction that the reconstruction phase began, and people from various professions will have to collaborate very carefully, because this is not something that you can do very quickly. You have to go slow. You have to digest the information that you collect from people from various professions. And this is how you have to do the construction, because Antakya is a multicultural city that has the residue of hundreds of years, and you cannot build it at once overnight. This is also valid for the culture. This is also valid for the heritage. You can also see that various historical buildings, this is a mosque, for example, were also damaged. Some stone buildings managed to survive, despite the fact that some additional stories were constructed on top of them. They still managed to survive. This is the Kurtuluş Avenue, and this is the end of my time, I think. I would like to say one final thing. In our culture, there is this widespread habit of building small shops at the ground floor. These were the historical buildings, I'm sorry. I think this mentality has to be changed. It is possible to do the planning for this, because ground floor has to be the most durable part of the building, because the ground floor takes the most of the load, amongst other stories. And if you decide to start a shop there, then you will probably reduce its durability, because the companies or shop owners sometimes cut the beams and remove them to be able to store more goods inside. Or from time to time, they are building windows, large windows, rather than the beams. That's why the ground floor becomes very weak. This is a social tradition which must be questioned. And in the study groups that I have attended, I am trying to raise this issue. And these are the last two pictures. You can see another neighborhood of Armutlu and Elektrik of Antakya. Think about, I have taken thousands of pictures like those I have shown you, so that you can understand the size of the disaster, magnitude of the disaster. This is Harbiye neighborhood. If you would like to have a longer look to the photographs, I have given the moderators 2 links where you can view all these photographs, and the moderators will send you the links. Thanks very much. I hope that the reconstruction process will be slow and sturdy. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mr. Murat. Now I would like to leave the floor to Madam Açelya Uçan. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. It was a sudden start. My name is Açelya Uçan. I'm a volunteer for Çatı Women's Shelter Foundation, and I'm going to talk about our activities to combat against violence against women, the situation that we have been facing since the earthquake. Now, first, I'm going to talk about the things we've faced with and how we managed to mobilize, especially in terms of humanitarian relief. People, as the right advocates, of course, have their predictions or forecasts regarding what could happen during an earthquake, during a disaster. But of course, the current dynamics of the country, the current situation that we are in, have an impact on this. First of all, let me talk about how we mobilize the social solidarity, civil society organizations, children's rights organizations, and women's rights organizations. I'm going to talk about this. And within this context, I'm going to point out the feminist solidarity group for the disasters, and civilian coordination group for children in disasters. Feminist Solidarity Group for Disasters is a solidarity group formed by the feminists in Istanbul. Our aim was to meet the needs in a sustainable manner during the disasters in a way that would bring women together. And for the children disaster group, we are trying to bring together various civil society organizations and child rights groups. We are undertaking very important monitoring work, and we are also trying to create some kind of a toolbox for all the humanitarian relief volunteers. You can follow our activities on our website. As the Çatı Foundation, since it was all about humanitarian relief, as the feminist women who volunteer for Çatı, we have acted in solidarity with women and children within the earthquake region. And what was our experience like? Çatı is a women's organization working against the domestic violence. Women who were subjected to domestic violence have been coming to our shelter or our foundation, and this was what we saw in the first stage. Despite the fact that women were being subjected to domestic violence, they were hesitant to find some support. They didn't apply or submit any demands to our foundation because they were kind of ashamed. Not only I'm talking about the earthquake region. In general, we received not many applications from women, but after a while, we caught back, and from time to time, we have seen a rise in the number of applications because women, although women thought that my pain was not very important in the face of what has been going on in the earthquake region, but unfortunately, there is this reality of domestic violence, which is threatening the lives of women. Another activity that we have undertaken, we have established a solidarity movement together with the women's organization in the earthquake region. They were impacted by the earthquake, and they also established some solidarity networks with the women who were affected. We were trying to understand their needs as women who have been directly and indirectly impacted by the earthquake. We wanted to learn more about their needs, and we have established a solidarity with them. We wanted to pass the current experience of Çatı, and we wanted to understand what we could do in terms of helping them heal the wounds of earthquake. Another attempt that we did, and we're still doing this, for the volunteers who were thinking on going to the earthquake zone, we decided to share our experiences. Actually, I especially point this out. As the time passed, we have seen that the problems were getting bigger. After the earthquake, domestic violence between the walls spread to the tents, and this has become even more obvious, visible. And if the volunteers hadn't worked in such a field before, from time to time they panicked in the destructiveness of the male violence, and from time to time we have seen some certain attitudes that prevented us from bringing help to women. They have, for example, for the sake of rescuing the women from this violence, they try to make the decisions on behalf of the women and instead of women. So they try to forcibly move them somewhere else. But this was a wrong attitude. While providing help or relief to someone who has been abused, we should not make any decisions in their stead. And on the one hand, we have to pay attention to various obstacles that prevent women from seeking help. And this needed support. And we began to see there were some significant problems. On the one hand, we began saying our word regarding the probable risks and preventive activities in the human relief activities and rights-based activities in the face of such kind of disasters, especially during earthquakes where people lose their shelters. Not only domestic violence, but also different forms of male violence can emerge in the form of sexual violence, for example. And we are also conducting long-term support plans, and we have paid a field visit. In the following months, we will pay another one. We are in Istanbul. We don't aim to open an office in another city, but of course, we are receiving calls from various cities. Now, I'm going to speed up a bit.
First of all, we were all able to identify the needs of women and children. And for that, of course, we initially had to collect some findings about their situation. And accordingly, we see that if women who had experienced male violence before the earthquake were not able to receive any support, and there we can directly see the practice of lack of coordination, the continuation of it. For example, men who are wearing electronic bracelets so that they will be staying away from the women that they're attacking. We were not able to collect any information, and we really do not know whether these women can receive any support, or if they are in another city, whether they can still be protected. And also family courts, especially these courts are key in terms of receiving support for the women who have experienced violence. In line with law number 6284 for protection orders, it's tantamount to have these courts. Unfortunately, we do not know how the family courts are issuing these type of protection orders. We have no information. Also, we are faced with a huge poverty. Most of the time, women call us because they need financial support to survive. They're trying to meet their basic needs, and I would like to underline the situation of the women who had to migrate to other cities, because if you are displaced, unfortunately, it's very difficult for you to find support in the city, in the host city that you have been to, and most of the supports are provided to the families, and single women are really deprived of this women, and we know that the poverty is increasing for this group. And also we have the situation of the lost and unaccompanied children. Unfortunately, neither from the Ministry of Health nor from the Ministry of Family and Social Services, due to the lack of coordination, we do not know about the whereabouts these children, and we have heard a lot of rumors, and some of these rumors were later on found places in the news as well. For example, it is said that these children, some of these children, are given to non-state organizations. Of course, we need to provide evidence, but definitely the situation of the lost and the unaccompanied children is a burning issue, and these children are faced with human trafficking besides others. Rather than going into the details of our field visit, I would like to talk about the needs that we were able to identify when we went there. When we were in the field, we had seen that people do not have access to basic needs, and there is still the sexist division of labor and growing discrimination, and women have to fight with health issues or access to basic needs. So these are all the responsibilities of women, and as there is limited access to services, these are growing bigger. For example, if you want to go to the toilet, you have to cover a huge distance. And if you're also taking care of the children, then you have to take that distance several times a day. And the same is also true for washing the clothes and other things. And most of the time, women, if they're not part of a family, cannot have any access to any services. For example, women who do not want to stay with their families or who have divorced do not have access to services. And there is almost no preventive measures concerning the risks related to violence. And there is a serious discrimination in terms of access to violence. Açelya, I'm so sorry. All right, will be my last remark. And later on, if people are interested, I would be happy to give you more information in the Q&A. Thank you very much, Açelya. Now we will continue with Ayten Zara. After completing my education in the UK, I returned to my country, and both in Turkey and in other places, I have, in my career, worked on the issues of different dimensions of psychological trauma. And I was part of several intervention teams in Antep, Hatay, Maraş, and in many other places. There is an unbelievable dimension or size of trauma, I can say. And we cannot only call this a natural disaster. In fact, what we're faced with is both a humanitarian disaster and a natural disaster. And we know that people are faced with the results of a serious destruction. And the destruction can only be measured to the extent by the extent of which you have lost. If you're going through a trauma, it could be due to a man-made disaster or a natural disaster. The more losses we have, the higher the trauma we will experience. No matter where you go. You can go to Maraş, Adıyaman, or Hatay. Of course, Hatay is one of the worst hit cities. People are experiencing many different traumas, both geographically and also in the humanitarian sense. And I'm a trauma expert by career, but of course, I mean, this is the size of this disaster is really huge. And this is why people are calling this the disaster of the century. So the country is devastated, both economically and socially, and it also has lasting effects. There are many things that I can say. But let me just tell you why I do not only define this disaster as a natural disaster. But before that, let me just say this. As the disaster platform, I'm a member of the founding organizations of this platform. We initially went to Hatay, and the first photograph or the first video that you see is what we were faced with on the first day. People have sent aid from all around, but that was how disorganized it was. And initially, we also didn't know what to do. But later on, we started classifying all the aid that was received, and then we devised certain systems to distribute this aid. And we worked very hard. And the second photograph belongs to the warehouse that was used as a aid distribution center. And of course, it was not sufficient to distribute this from that center. We had to take those aid materials to many people who weren't able to come to this place. Because people were in need of bread or warm clothing, and we had to work very hard for days and set up a system. Initially, the most severe needs were finding a shelter and finding food. Initially, we weren't able to find any blankets, and even the volunteers' blankets were distributed. And this is me that you can see in the third picture, because in the first 10-day period, people did not only experience that disaster. After the disaster, after the earthquake, people started experiencing hunger and thirst and cold. So, and to the extent possible, we try to help these people, and shelter was a serious issue. There were not enough tents, unfortunately. And even when you find tents, it was very difficult to distribute these. And these were the most serious issues that we had encountered. But of course, each and every tent we found were given to the people, including those in the rural parts of these cities. And we also helped them set up the tents, and we also, of course, set up stove systems because these people needed warmth as well. So those are the humanitarian aspects of this earthquake. But not only that, people needed the continuation of this kind of support. And there were times that we were not able to meet the requests or the demand. And that was putting a great stress on us. And as volunteers, we had to overcome this. And relief workers like us were there, in fact, to provide both humanitarian support and psychosocial support. But that was one of the most serious crises that we had experienced as well. For all the reasons that I have tried to explain so far, this is not only a natural disaster. There are different types of destructions. One of these is, yes, people were hit by the earthquake, and that's one thing. Secondly, there were many people who were still alive under the rubble, and their loved ones tried to take them out of the rubble. However, there were not enough equipment to take those people out of that rubble. So that was, in fact, a true murder. Many people were killed after the earthquake, as it was not possible to take them from under the rubble. And many people were devastated as they have lost their loved ones. People waited for days to be able to rescue their loved ones, and that's an even greater trauma. That's why this should not only be considered as a natural disaster, this is at the same time a man-made disaster. And the second photograph and the third photograph, and you can find similar scenes in other cities as well. And of course, I have much worse footage, but I wouldn't like to show this. Many people put their beds by the rubble, and they lived there with the hope that there would be somehow an opportunity for them to take their loved ones from under the rubble. So this will definitely leave traces, and not only now, but also in the future. And for the next generations, it will have implications. I've spent a lot of time in the earthquake zone. From time to time, I come back to Istanbul. But if you ask me, I mean, the houses that are destroyed, they left their traces on my eyes, and the smell of the corpse. So that's also terrible. And people's cries, they left their traces in my heart. and their cries also left their traces in my ears. And these are the traces that will never fade away. This is what I have to say. Of course, we are part of the disaster platform. As members of the World Human Relief, we will continue our presence, and we have also worked very hard to provide them psychosocial support apart from the humanitarian aid. Of course, initially, the most important thing was to provide these people with shelter, food, and also to provide them with stove and tents. We worked very hard and we did our best, and we are continuing to do so. And people are still in need of food, and especially in the rural areas, there are many villages that we are trying to reach, and the lack of water. Unfortunately, we don't have clean water, and that's why the contagious diseases are spread all over the place. So these are the other problems. There's another. These are pictures from our work in the rural parts of the city. This is a village in Maraş, in Nurdağ sub-province. They don't have tents over there, but these women were able to build houses by recycling the materials. For example, they have used a carpet, as you can see on the side of the shelter that the women have there built. So on one hand, these people have experienced a huge destruction. On the other hand, they have their strength and they are doing their best to survive. And in the initial phase of the earthquake, recovery and rescue, this search and rescue, that's very important. Later on, we begin to focus on recovery, and in the third phase, we focus on providing psychological support. And now we started this phase. And here you can see from photographs, but I really wanted to lastly share these two photographs with you. I will try to be quite fast about this. The first picture is really important for me. It's a very dear photograph for me. Now, you can see there is this dead silence all over the streets. And in the middle of the rubble, there is this kid who's trying to carry away pieces of stones from that rubble. And that explains everything to me. That picture. So on one hand, there is desperation, and we really need to understand at this point whose victims we are and how we can really trust our lives to people who do not deserve this trust. And the photograph on the right-hand side, that's also a very dear photograph. So here you can see two people, in fact, that's a couple. They have cups of coffee in their hands, and they are they're taking their own picture. They're taking a selfie, and this means that they are really there, and they have survived, and they will continue to build their lives. I have a lot more to say, but as we have only 10 minutes, I will only say this. Thank you very much, Ayten. And now I would like to give the floor to Mert Uğur Aksoy. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I think it's a bit unfortunate for me to take up the floor after Professor Ayten because she explained it very well, which I may not be able to. Thanks very much for coming. Rather than a presentation, I'm going to speak and then share some photographs with you. I'm going to talk about the HOPE, Lokman Hekim Health Foundation, and the civil society organization efforts. I was in Hatay by the 7th of February, the next day after the earthquake. We've been there. Why Hatay? I have been asked, and I said, we had no information. No institution could get any information about Hatay because many people were under the debris. We have seen chaos in Hatay and in other cities. And as Lokman Hekim Health Foundation, we have launched research, rescue, and relief activities. Starting from 7th of February, I was providing first aid, research and rescue, and then we've been to Hatay Expo storage, and together with the disaster management organization, we try to organize it. We have seen a huge chaos, and in the face of such a chaos, we have seen people coming out of the debris, coming to our storage, asking for needs, and we have established a system. And in Hatay Expo building, such relief activities are still going on. When I was asked why Hatay, I've always said that whatever we have heard in social media, saw in social media, was real. People were shouting, trying to be rescued under the debris, and this was real. And first 72 hours were really important, but I think in the face of such a disaster, even the first 15 days were really more important. After 13 days, after 15 days, we have seen some people rescued live, and we tried to identify what was going on in the field. The doctors, especially the doctors, we have conducted a research about them. We tried to identify the number of doctors who was lost, a number of hospital buildings which collapsed. We tried to identify the situation because we had to maintain the health services. This was the most acute need. We identified the number of deaf doctors and healthcare providers. We have sent containers as the residence of the doctors, because one doctor could undertake the job of 1,000 doctors under such an environment. We then decided to send hygiene sets to the region. As a result of the information that we collected from the region, we have identified that there is a very widespread epidemic, especially mange, and people are infested with lice. But despite the fact that 3 months almost passed, this is still a prevalent situation, and we're still sending health sets to the region. And as a result of research, we have seen that a certain amount of poisonous gas was released from the buildings, and air pollution is very high. That's why people need masks. We're trying to provide information to prevent any health problems. As Lokman Hekim Health Foundation, we have supported the scholarships of the medical students, and we have conducted an operation together with them. This was really an exciting moment because they were medical students and they hadn't get into touch with any of the patients as a doctor. The third grade students, fourth grade, fifth grade students, intern doctors were sent to the field, transferred to the field, and we have distributed the health sets. And during the distribution of our health sets, we have witnessed some very important events. Now I'm going to talk about the volunteer part of the NGOs, especially in Hatay storage. There is this magnificent coordination between the volunteers, and how I have recognized how the NGOs could be powerful, because despite the fact that we were active, we didn't know each other. I have managed to meet with various civil society organizations, and we try to support the motivation of our volunteers. Please try to imagine the following story. They are waking up at 8:30, 9, and they were taking leaves from their works. And from the early hours of the morning, they came to us. They have been trying to classify the goods in the storage. They were trying to identify the needs and dispatching the products to the earthquake region. So whenever we identified that the volunteers were becoming unwilling, like losing their motivation, we try to do our best. This is a box on which pictures were drawn by one of our volunteers who could draw very well. We just tried to provide motivation to the children. And then whenever we saw our team was losing motivation, we have received a letter from one of the kids. Thanks to this letter we received, we managed to tangibly show our impact on the victims of the earthquake. And this really boosted our motivation. And in volunteer work, the motivation is vital, as you may know. And then whenever we saw that medical students were distributing items to the children and trying to treat them, because we highly believe in the healing power of the NGOs, it is very important to provide support to the local NGOs in the earthquake region. In the short and middle term, the NGOs have been undertaking some very important activities which must be supported by us. Now, it is very important to think about how you can help to the civil society organizations. If you want to know how you can help them, pay attention to their activities. You can even provide support to them by supporting their social media accounts. You can make donations. You can provide grants. Thanks very much for being part of this story. Thanks very much for listening to me. Now, I think we are ready for questions and answers. Thanks. Thanks very much to all the speakers for sharing their experiences from the earthquake zone. Now, I would like to read the questions. The first question to Mr. Murat. Murat Bey, you talked about the multicultural aspect of Hatay, and in your work, this is an important theme that you have been pursuing. What is the overlap between this and your previous studies? Thanks very much. First of all, of course, the power of the civil society solidarity was so impressive that it nourished my hopes. In the last 5 years, there is this strengthening of civil society organization, and this is something very good. I could be there only for 6 days, including the travel. I wanted to stay more, but because of the school, I had to go back. When I went there, I didn't need to spend any money. I was almost put to shame by the hospitality of the people around me, because you're treated as a guest. You are there as a guest, so you didn't experience any disasters yourself, but the people are treating you as a guest and as if they hadn't experienced any disasters, any destruction at all. I don't want to speak too long, but in our country, I think there is a huge gap, huge weakness in terms of creating documents, establishing archives. I think we are very slow. We are not producing enough number of documents, enough amount of archives, because the sustainability of a society has something to do with the establishment of a memory. If you fail to establish a memory, you cannot sustain your society to the future. There will be disagreements. You won't be able to come together to create some certain collaborations. So the archive, the establishing a memory is very important. And what I was trying to do is that during this reconstruction process, especially in Antalya, I wanted to create some documents that could be taken as a visual reference, because I did not only photograph the buildings that were damaged or that turned into a rubble, I have also taken the photographs of some buildings which were architecturally important. I have also recorded them. And finally, in my university, I'm a full-time lecturer in Sabancı University. And apart from my normal lectures, I was asked to focus on a project lecture in the semester and in this term, and 11 of my students were assigned to roam the streets of the disaster zone using Google Earth and to take pictures. Google Street View photographs are not updated yet, so we have the images of those buildings before the earthquake. So Google is still keeping a record of the undamaged buildings. We have all been in those cities in different times, and we have taken, of course, taken pictures of the city, but our photographs were not uninterrupted pictures of the city as it is. I believe these pictures should be recorded as soon as possible. These images in the Google Earth must be recorded as soon as possible. So I have assigned my students to collect the screenshots of those streets and buildings. Our sole aim was to create a database that could be used as a visual reference point. Thanks very much. This is a very valuable work. A second question to Madam Açelya. Açelya Hanım told us about the reservations that women in the disaster zone could experience. Is it possible to obtain information and aid from the sexual reproduction health? Could you also answer this question by paying consideration to LGBTI? Of course, there are various difficulties in terms of access to health services, including the sexual health and reproductive health. When it comes to access to sexual health services, we can see that this has become a significant problem after the earthquake. When it comes to the family planning services, for example, people are unable to access to those services, and which increases the risk of unplanned pregnancy. There is a severe hygiene problem. Women and young girls have various needs, including the menstruation health services. And because of and women and young girls are having a lot of difficulties in accessing to those services, plus because of the discrimination. And it is very difficult to make such kind of problems visible. There is this association of public health experts. They are active in Hatay. I had interviewed them, and I want to touch upon the problems that I have mentioned. Women are hesitating to talk about whenever they experience a sexual health problem. Only to the experts they could open up, but there is this increasing difficulty of finding healthcare. In Turkey, it is very difficult to find abortion services. Despite the fact that abortion is legal up to 10 weeks, it is very difficult to access this free of charge abortion services. And in Hatay, there was only one single private hospital that was providing abortion services. So unwanted pregnancies have risen, and family planning and abortion services cannot be accessed. So the problem is multiplied. So this is one of the needs. And regarding the LGBTI plus individuals, I think their problems must be addressed as well. The difficulties faced by women, especially difficulties that needs preventive measures, these are all valid for the LGBTI plus individuals. There is a severe discrimination in terms of their access to the services. They're also experiencing this problem of visibility as LGBTI individuals. That's why we have to pay attention to the fact that they are individuals with some special needs, but unfortunately in the earthquake zone, they're almost ignored. Their needs are almost ignored. So it is possible to say that together with women, they are a group that are under significant risk. Already existing problems are exacerbated by the discrimination. And you talked about the people who visited the earthquake zone and faced the destiny of their relatives. So could you talk about how the volunteers manage and cope with the stress of the situation in earthquake zone?
There will be a team of 72 people who will be sent to the region. And we are aware that they will be traumatized of the deaths and other issues that they will encounter. And before we send these teams to the region, we give them a 1-week preparatory training to all the volunteers. And also, during the time that they spend in the field, we have debriefings, because they may encounter different types of difficulties, challenges, and we just jointly discuss how these could be addressed. And when they come back from the field, we provide them supervision support. And if among them there are some people who will be in need of one-to-one psychological support, we also provide this support so that they can reintegrate themselves to their normal lives or professional lives. Murat Bey, there is a brief question. Are you thinking about taking new photographs in the region after the removal of the debris? If I mean, if I wasn't teaching, then I would have been to the region a couple of more times, and I'm collaborating with Kenan Kartarcı, a cartographist, and he is using orthophotography. Is taking photographs through using a drone, and then all these different photographs are collated. And after seeing his photographs, I really felt strange in a way, because already some debris were removed and some of the damaged buildings were also destroyed. So in places, in plots where we had 100 buildings earlier, 25 or 30 were left, and the remaining part of the plot is just empty. So that gives us a better picture as to how big the damage is, and how few buildings that are that can still be used. And 3/4 of these cities are already destroyed. And I mean, in the first opportunity that I find, I'm planning to visit the place. Definitely we need to follow this process. And let me just give an example. Atatürk Cultural Convention Center in Istanbul. I have a photograph of the center in 2017, and they were talking about a project for strengthening the building. But later on, this project, I mean, there was a change of mind, and they decided to destroy the old buildings. And before the building was destroyed, I took pictures of the machines working on the building, and now I have the whole history, and that itself tells how it would be possible to preserve that building. That was something that I witnessed in Istanbul, and for that reason, this rebuilding process, reconstruction process, definitely need to be supervised, monitored by everyone. So the more people go there, the more people document what is going on in the process, the better it will be. We definitely need to produce more and more documents, because when you lose something, you may think that, I mean, what good a document is when that asset is already gone. Of course, first we will try to preserve, but if you cannot stop it, but at least having the documentation of that lost heritage will definitely help us to change it. And the new generations will perhaps learn from those documents, and that's why very soon I will try to go back to the region and work on that again. There's a question for Mert Uğur Aksoy. What is the greatest difficulty that the physicians encounter at the moment? Unfortunately, the doctors do not have any place to stay. So we have information coming from the Turkish Medical Association. And we know that there are different types of contagious diseases, hygiene kits, and washing machines or refrigerators. These are key. Unfortunately, these type of services can only be rendered in this headquarters of the or in the aid centers. And also for the physicians, it's very difficult for us to find places to stay for the volunteers. And washing machines, that's a serious need for the doctors as well. Now we can only send them clean sheets. We cannot provide any washing machines or other kinds of thing. And one last question, this is for Açelya Uçan. In the earthquake hit regions, the family structures have changed, the household structures have changed. And to what extent women can really have access to the shelters provided to the households? And that's a question for you, Ms. Uçan. Thank you very much. This is a critical question, and this is a thought-provoking question. And what you said is very important. The law number 6284 does not provide protection for women only in the domestic environments. The law provides for the measures that need to be taken for women in all circumstances. And I believe the law's spirit is strong enough to be adapted for the current situation. But of course, in practice, we know about the difficulties that are encountered. Unfortunately, the practitioner's approach negatively affect the situation, and we are faced with very serious, difficult decisions. For example, if a person is exerting violence on a woman, that man is sent away from that specific tent, but this man is staying in the same tent city, and the man has access to the tent at all times, and this means that the woman is under constant risk. So unfortunately, these were the kinds of the decisions that we have met so far, and unfortunately there is no system to develop on these issues, and the family courts are not functioning at the moment, which could in fact think about the specific situation of the women. That's why we're encountering serious challenges, and we really need to think about it as more Çatı, purple roof for each and every city. And my colleagues already talked about the different dynamics for each and every city. What kind of measures should be taken within the scope of the law number 6284, such as the decision of confidentiality. So on all of those issues, we need strategic plans in the post-disaster period, and we still need to do that, but unfortunately this is not done. And the law number 6284 that needs to be put into practice, otherwise we will be hearing more about these good for nothing decisions. Thank you so much. We have come to the end of this session. Unfortunately, there are a couple of questions that we were not able to respond, and maybe in the upcoming parts of our series we can respond these questions. As the Columbia Global Center, we would like to thank all the distinguished speakers, and we do hope that we will continue our discussions. We would like to thank our interpreters Işıl and Eren in this difficult subject matter. They helped us to voice our opinions in other languages as well. And also I would like to thank all the participants for the questions and for the interest. We will continue thinking about developing new projects and new ideas. Thank you so much.